All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Dunn County Executive Committee to order. Um, we will begin with our traditional call of the roll. I believe we have everybody except Tom Quinn. I would look for a motion to approve the minutes. Supervisor Steen moves, Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Got to get my head back in the more formal space. Any additions, comments, quibbles with the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public comments? Looks like no. Moving on to so we would normally do county manager report here, but in the interest of letting Tom get out of here sooner, without objection, I'm going to move 7A up in front of county manager report. Okay. Planning, resources, and development. Amend land division ordinance A, first reading. Does anyone have any questions for Tom? Would you like him to step up and give us a quick rundown? Nick, you look like you have a...
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. So there's actually only one ordinance. A is the formal action that the county board takes to adopt the changes, and B is the changes.
Ah, great.
So there aren't two ordinances. One of them is they're part of the same thing. They'll be merged together.
There'll be a single item
for the county board meeting.
Board.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, what you have before you is just some amendments that we're proposing. The land division ordinance, we went through a complete rewrite actually of that back 2021, and it was codified, adopted in January of 2022. So we've had just over a year now of using it. A lot of things are working really well. Other things are not working so well. Getting some feedback from the private surveyors, from private landowners, and just we've had a good chance here to review what's working well and what's not. So we're proposing some amendments that we feel are necessary. I've been working with Corp Counsel on that. We've had it to PRND, I think 4 times, maybe 5. So it's been vetted quite well through the PRND committee. Involves staff from the Register of Deeds, Land Information Office, 3 divisions of Environmental Services Department. So we just feel we have a much better document now. I'm not really prepared to go through all of the things we've changed. I can touch on some of the high level, like the access easements, private roads. We made some major changes in there. Some of our definitions, environmentally sensitive areas, wetlands. We've slightly revised the variance procedure. A lot of it was just better clarification on some things. So we revised our fee schedule to allow an applicant to lump together multiple variance requests, or request multiple variances on one application. And then we have a tiered fee schedule for that. Trying to think. High value ag land. We revised the definition on that.
And renamed it lands with high agricultural value.
Correct.
So there was some confusion among readers that, are you talking about the market value of this property, or its value as used for agricultural land? So we changed the terminology and expanded the definition.
We've added structure to our definition. That comes up quite often. What constitutes a structure? And a lot of times we're in disagreement with, the landowner or the surveyor. So we've clarified, we've actually defined what a structure is. Added some requirements for certified survey maps for plats. We've made some minor modifications in our storm or surface drainage and erosion control section. Yeah, the biggest thing was our streets and access easements. We made some changes in there that I feel are going to be very beneficial. Outlots, requiring access now for outlots unless there's certain conditions are met. If they're going to an adjoining landowner, then that's going to be waived. So yeah, that's a real high level overview. It was all in your packet. If anybody has a specific question on anything, I'd be glad to answer that.
Anyone? Oh, Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, would you say that after these changes, it's more user friendly?
Yes, not only for staff, but also the surveyors and the private landowners.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to point out that Tom goes out of his way to include any number of people, the real estate people. We had at least 3 different town chairs here regularly. So I want to compliment you on that, and we got some good feedback from them too. So nice job. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody in the whole county if they were listening. Thanks.
Anybody else? Looks like you're off the hook. Thanks, Tom. And that one's just a review, so back to the county manager report.
Okay, first item is just a review of the draft agenda for the, let me find it, for the county board.
Tom, if you want to sneak out, no one will notice.
Well, now they.
Didn't come up. Someday I'm gonna get better at this, just not today. There we go. All right, so we have a couple of retirees this month. Cindy Hoff is leaving the Department of Human Services after 26 years, a little over 26 years, and Dennis Steinmeier is leaving Highway Department after 21 years. And purchase orders, I'm gonna have Melissa Gillenbach just do a really quick 5 minutes on our emergency notification system. Just again, a reminder, I think every time that we can get the information out about how people can sign up and what the capabilities of that system are in terms of alerts in the case of an emergency or a disaster. So she'll do that. I did prepare, and we'll talk about in a bit, a document on mandated services and that we'll review. And then I have a PowerPoint, which I'm going to run through with you today, kind of based on your comments that as we did CIP, it was helpful to hear things more than once. I'm hoping that you will find that that is true again with this budget prep stuff. Then we have a request for a change in use of ARPA capital improvements and ARPA funding, which you will also consider today. The ordinance changes that, oh no, I'm sorry. Resolutions amending the county supervisor districts, 2 of them. And then the ordinances, some budget adjustments, pretty straightforward. Any questions about that?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. All right, so I did provide you with a document in your folder. It's a bit of a work in progress because honestly, I borrowed, I was going to say stole, but borrowed most of it from St. Croix County. Did some revisions to make it applicable to Dunn County. And then Also, we have just some tweaking and I need to add UW extension yet to this document. It's a lot of data. I think it's probably more of or a lot of information. It's probably more of a good reference document as you dig into budget and you start to say whatever it is, do we have to do that? This would be a spot where by department you could look at what it says with regard to whether that's something that we're mandated to do. The one thing that I would say about mandated versus non-mandated services is that there's a ton of spots in statute that mandate things, but they don't mandate to what degree. So especially from my human services days, we have, and I've mentioned this before, we have, let me find behavioral health. We have responsibility to, primary responsibility for the well-being, treatment, and care of the mentally ill, developmentally disabled, alcoholic, or other drug-dependent citizens residing in the county, and ensuring that those individuals in need of such emergency services found within its county receive immediate emergency services. So I'm not sure exactly, and I don't think that you'll find a more thorough definition to what having primary responsibility for the well-being, treatment, and care of the mentally ill, developmentally disabled, and alcohol and drug dependent individuals are. It's a mandate, it's a requirement, it just doesn't tell you how much of that you have to do. Similarly, there are similar ones in the child welfare world. If I think about things that I know that can drive a budget somewhat precariously, those would be two things: adult mental health placements and child's protective services placements. But so I think that everyone would like a nice, neat list of all of the things that are mandated and just check the boxes, and it doesn't quite work that way. But I hope that you find this a helpful document as we work our way through budget in terms of a reference to what we need to be doing. And I have to chuckle because some of these things I'm like, we really have to do that? I can't think of an example at the moment, but it's just like, wow. I didn't know that was part of our responsibility, but it is. So any questions about that document?
Okay, Supervisor Morehouse.
No, I just wanted to say, I know this is a lot of data, but I personally find it really helpful to understand that, much of the breadth of county services are not necessarily specified, but are required.
Mhm.
And we managed to roll with that pretty well, I think. So thank you.
Okay. Assistant county manager consideration. So this is not an action item. It's just a report. It's something that I have been mulling around for a bit now. And you have just a staff report in your documents that I can't find mine, but the bottom line to it is that now that I am almost a year into this position, I see that one, it's been very, very beneficial to be at all the committee meetings, but it does take a lot of time. I'd say 25 to 35% of my time, or 25 to 30% of my time, depending on how many meetings there are and what sort of the tasks are that come out of that. Also having a new team of individuals who don't have a lot of depth of experience in managing county, present company included. We spend a lot of time bouncing things off of each other and sorting through how did this used to be handled and how should we handle it now, and etc. So we spend a lot of time kind of processing and making sure we're doing our best to make good decisions. Obviously, I think one of the benefits that I brought to this role was the historical context. And so when it comes to budget, I probably am more involved in budget than maybe will even need to be in a few years. But right now, just in terms of, again, a lot of new people, relatively new people at the table. So all of that is sort of one side of the job, all of which I really, really like a lot. And then the other side of the job are all of the things that either are self-identified, so like communication and recruitment and retention of staff, and economic development, all of those things that I think that are important to my role. But then other things that have either been identified or are kind of those budding issues, or maybe even beyond budding issues that we deal with. So whether it's housing or broadband, childcare, kind of, I gave you the list of various things that have come up, some that have gotten a little attention, some that have gotten more attention. And also recognizing that, so all of those things all become part of this job, which it has become clear that I can't tend to all of those things well. But outside of that, I certainly have personally experienced when someone is put in the position of being brought along in terms of succession planning. So in my role in DHS, I was the deputy director for a number of years. I'd been a manager for a number of years, and then kind of flawlessly moved into the role of director, and saw amongst my counterparts across the state that when they hadn't had the opportunity to experience all of those experiences that I had, it was a much harder transition. And so I see similarly in this role that there could be a solid plan for shared equipping of whether it's the next county manager or it's an assistant county manager who walks alongside the next county manager, but has that ability to take what's some historical stuff, some stuff that's happening now, and move it into the next phase of wherever the county goes after I'm no longer in this position. So in the 2024 budget proposal, I did include a request for an assistant county manager position, thinking that we would likely, depending on what talents that person brought to the table, likely look at all of the things that needed to be done and divvy up some of those and the oversight and responsibility for them. And then really work hard over the next few years to have that person have a depth of experiences and knowledge that would help them to be able to either lead or come alongside whoever the next leader is. So I don't, you can certainly ask me questions, and but I'm floating the trial balloon, if I'm honest, but I'm also just introducing the idea so that you have some time to ponder whether or not you think that that's a good use of resources or not. That's not even the right way to say that, because sometimes something can be a great use of resources and there aren't resources for it. So, but whether you think that that is a priority or not a priority.
What kind of a cost would that position carry?
Oh, I would guess that $150,000 range. Just by the time that you added salary and benefits to a position like that. So because it doesn't currently exist as a position, we need to go through the process of, and I've started to write a position description, but of detailing out what the responsibilities to that position would be. And then it runs through a process to determine where it gets classified and what it gets paid. And we obviously haven't done any of that. Probably won't take that super far. We just picked a target number for now, just as a placeholder, but probably only if it was ultimately approved would I go through the work of actually developing the total responsibilities for that position. But that's a reasonable ballpark figure.
Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, Chris, do we have a succession planning for all our departments or not?
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Um,
And
Good.
Would you say that that's a function of our tight budgets over the last few years, or is that lack of planning, or a combination of things, or? Because I feel that the experiences I've seen on the county is that if you have people trained to take over for the person that's up above them, you're avoiding some pitfalls that can happen if somebody gets sick or if they quit. You don't have anybody to cover. And I thought a number of years ago that we were working on that. But I realized I probably fell by the wayside because of the budgeting, but
I think it happens in bits and pieces. So I would use, for instance, like the county clerk's office. It's an elected position. And so there's a fair amount of knowledge base that then resides with the clerk, with the what would Jackie's role be? Deputy clerk, the deputies, similarly in the Register of Deeds office and in the treasurer's office. But there's only so far that can kind of go, and it's not that there's no deputy clerks or deputy registered deeds or deputy treasurers that have ever moved into that role, but that doesn't always happen either. So, but I think that there's they become the kind of conduit for or the continuity through some of that. Similarly, it's built in naturally in the sheriff's department. So you have a sheriff, but then you have a chief deputy, and you have a jail administrator, a jail captain. You have people right underneath the sheriff who are going to stay as the sheriff may or may not, depending on whether they seek reelection and are reelected. I think it gets to be harder in some of the other departments because honestly, this is where budget or where finances come into play. Everybody's got jobs that absorb almost all of their time, if not all of their time. So it's really hard to equip someone to come in, it's like for instance, in the Department of Human Services with the deputy director, there's a full-time workload for a deputy director that did not necessarily involve becoming prepared to be the director. And so I think it's some of that where we've pared back enough that we don't have a ton of capacity. I think it's an awareness thing on everyone's mind, to try to do the best job that they can of kind of imparting and planning for change, but it's definitely an area where we have some vulnerabilities.
Supervisor Morehouse, then Supervisor Calabrese.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What Chris said notwithstanding, one of the reasons that the Department of Human Services works as well as it does is Chris's focus on grooming leaders, building leadership that obviously involve, Dale's job wasn't necessarily second to yours, but the fact that she has created structures for succession within the department, in cross-training people across a variety of difficult areas. I think what you did in human services is a kind of object lesson for the rest of the county. Should we be able to afford it and to do it? It's a good idea. It works.
Yeah, I think it has worked relatively well. It just always will remain challenging when people are full steam ahead doing the work that they were hired to do all day long.
Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so if the position, as you're envisioning it, is sort of a training for the next county manager, would that mean that the assistant county manager would need to go through a hiring process where these committees are all involved, or would they, because if it's assumed that that's the role they'll take and we spend time training them for that, and then it's time for the next county manager, do we bring in other applicants, or is it
Sure.
just eased in?
So I think that I think it's really important to go back and emphasize that it may be preparation for the next county manager, but that's not a guarantee for anybody. In all of the time that I was able to spend preparing to potentially be a director in the Department of Human Services, nobody could say you're going to be the next director, because honestly, the great gift to Department of Human Services directorship might show up at the door and just be looking to work in Dunn County and then, be more qualified, be more whatever, and step into that role. So I do think that there's two parts to it. So I think there is the potential of nurturing leadership and management talent with the idea of potentially successions planning, or them being the succession person. But I do think the other piece of it is that if you identify that person is going to be the constant through whatever the future changes are, then they can also have that role. So even if I were to leave and the next person were to be hired, and it wasn't that person is going to have gone through budget preparation and policy development, and they're going to have attended the public meetings and, all of those sorts of things that are going to, I think, be really helpful to helping the next person. Let's say that the next person came from Nome, Alaska, and knows little or nothing about Wisconsin, county work, has great talents in many other areas. That person then would be able to come alongside that person and really help them with the nuts and the bolts of how things work locally. So I don't think it's a done deal. Now, in terms of your question, as it currently exists, it would be a hire of the county manager, but that doesn't mean that you can't decide that you want it to be something different.
Yeah, I would presume that the next step up, if that person were to apply for the county manager job, would be handled in the way that it has traditionally been handled. There would be a search, certainly a national search, and we would look at, hopefully it's not my problem. Whoever the executive committee at that point in time is, would look at both internal and external candidates and select the best possible person. It might be the case that if we hire an assistant county manager and give them all of the preparation they would need, and they're a particularly good person, that they will, then be perfectly suited for that role. But it would certainly be the under the current rules, it would certainly be the decision of the executive committee at the time. Supervisor Rogers.
How many other counties in our area have an assistant?
I don't honestly know the total answer to that question. We've asked and we found 2. So it's probably not a super, I certainly can look around me, and say, like I know Eau Claire doesn't, Chippewa doesn't, St. Croix doesn't.
Well, and some of that is going to depend on what structure the county has
As a
in
county
terms of
administrator.
county administrator, county manager, because that varies wildly county to county. So that we're in having a county manager in the role we do with the authority we have, we are fairly unusual. I think there are 2 or 3 counties that are essentially have what we have, which is a hybrid.
Yeah, we are very unique.
It's a administrative coordinator with superpowers is what
Yeah.
so many of the things that a county administrator, many of the powers and authorities and responsibilities have been delegated to the administrative coordinator, but many are retained by the county board. And so it is a hybrid, and it's a good model. A lot of counties have progressed using our ordinance as the basis for their progression and evolved into having a county administrator.
Okay. I remember it was pretty unusual when I started on the board, so.
The other thing that I would say is that I think that, and this is a potential option as well, or none at all. But one option is, I think that in the counties that don't have an assistant, and maybe those that do, but in a lot of counties, there's much more administrative support. So they have essentially a county manager, administrative coordinator, county administrator would have an executive assistant who would do a lot of the legwork, like I do all the agendas and all, get all of that stuff ready and out and take, I'm the recording secretary for the executive committee, and committee on administration. So there's, I think it, as I referenced yesterday in a meeting, there's an adage that when you've seen one county, you've seen one county. And it's kind of, that's about how it
Yeah.
works. So it just can look so different from county to county. But I would say that the primary difference that I would see is that most of my colleagues have an executive assistant.
There are actually no, other than the division heads, there are no employees in administration that you directly supervise.
Nick, your microphone.
I was gonna, just to tie in with that, I'm sorry. Turn it on.
It is.
Okay, just to tie in with that, I was surprised to find last summer, as I was doing this role on a temporary basis, there are no employees within the Department of Administration other than the division heads that the county manager directly supervises. So there is some secretarial help up front, but there are no frontline clock punching employees that are directly supervised by the county manager.
Yeah, so I think the direct answer to your question, Mike, is not very many, but most of them have some employee or employees who would fulfill a number of the roles that we would be looking at. Sure.
So would it also be an option to explore the possibility of hiring somebody maybe not at that level as an assistant manager, but maybe as an assistant to the position or to help with all of the workload without necessarily putting it at that level of an expense? Just a thought.
Absolutely. And what I would say about that is I think this is why I wanted to introduce it to you at this point in the process so that you can think about it and kind of mull it all over, because part of it's what is your vision and goal as a group for transition. So if it's an assistant to the county manager, I'll just say that, more of that administrative support, it's far less likely that that person would be the next county manager or be involved in some of those. Like, I wouldn't expect an assistant to the county manager to attend county board meetings. Now we could say that, but so again, I think it's just thinking about where you all see things headed, and for transparency's sake, I would say, when I remember in my interview for this position, when people said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, fully retired, because that was the plan. This was a bridge. And I think I believe it's worked well in that capacity, but my goal, at least target goal at this point in time, would be to put in a couple of more years and then look to move to retirement. So whether that's 2 years or 2.5 years or whatever, something around that time frame. So I think I'm just I guess I'm encouraging you to think forward about where you would like that to be able to go. I know that a lot of my well, I shouldn't say a lot of my predecessors, because I've only experienced 2, but 2 of my predecessors did not attend all the committee meetings. I find that invaluable. But that could be a potential change, that's not an expectation for the county manager. Actually, it's actually written in the ordinance, that is an expectation. So, but I find it very, very valuable. So I think it's just, again, I'm not married to the idea that it has to be one way. I would just like you to think about where you would like the process to go over the next years in preparation for a change.
Yeah, and I will note, Chris and I haven't had this particular discussion, but we've had a number of discussions over the last year about institutional knowledge and succession planning. And, like we had the huge churn in our top management staff in the last two to 3 years. And we've had a pretty big turnover on the board. So one of the things that we've been talking about is how to preserve the things that need to be preserved. And also, I think, as a part of that, how do you let go of the things that are better dropped? But so one of the things that is, I'll come back to the board with in July and August is a survey for all of the county board supervisors. We're going to try and collect what people need to know when they become a member of a committee, when they become a member of the board. And just in the ongoing, how do we save the stuff that needs saving?
I truly see, and this was true in DHS as well. I truly see my role, at least in part, of identifying for you what are things that are going well and what are challenges, and then bringing you enough information to make choices and decisions about those. That's, really, as we get into, in a minute here, into talking about the 2024 budget, that's a huge piece of that one of my goals is that this group feels very, very fluent in the current state of county government budget, finance, and operations. And then you can lead then going forward, making decisions about what the priorities are. Ultimately, I'd love to be able to do a prioritization exercise with you. I don't know where the last year went. But it's gone, but it went right out the door. And now we're full-fledged into budget. So we're sort of past the ability to do prioritization exercise for 2024, but. Anything else? So again, no action, just a conversation, and know that will be included in the ask and many opportunities to discuss it again. All right, so this is going to take, I think, a little bit of time because I want to go slowly. So what I did and I printed it for you so that you have it again as a reference document. What I did for this presentation that I would intend to take to the board is I summed up all of the information, or kind of, I guess summed, or bits and pieces, picked pieces of information that I think will be important for you to know well, feel fluent in for the 2024 budget process. So okay. 2024, here we are halfway through June. All right, so this is a bit of the outline. What I want to talk with you about today are some of the positive financial indicators that we have as we head into budget season, what some of the contributors to need are, and then what some of the tools are that we have available. So first thing that I want you to be aware of is that we continue to trend positively on county sales tax revenue. You can see that our sales tax revenue has gone up $870,506 in the last 3 years. And you can see I gotta do it from here. Oh, I can't do it. I can only point at my own screen. You can see on the bottom of the May column, the year to date for sales tax revenue. So you see last year in May, we were at 1.724 million, and we're at 1.789 million this year. So again, about $60,000 of growth. A lot of that is a result of online sales. and sales tax, which, you know, took a huge jump during COVID. And I just quoted for you kind of how that works because that was, I wanted to learn myself. So basically there has been legislation over the last number of years that addresses online sales. And in 2018, there was a Supreme Court decision that said that that state could impose sales tax even if the seller had no physical presence in the state. Prior to that, they either had to be physically present or they had to have there's a definition for physical presence, but that changed. And so then Governor Evers in 2019 said that the authority provided the authority to require out-of-state retailers and marketplace providers to collect taxes. So that's why when you go to order something from, I just ordered something from Eddie Bauer, I pay sales tax, or you order something from Amazon or any of those online vendors, you pay sales tax. Any question about sales tax? This is something that comes directly to us in the form of a revenue. Okay, this is the most current rendition of what the proposed shared revenue changes will look like for Dunn County. Obviously, that's all a bit in flux at the moment. And that number that I've circled in red there has varied any place between about $350,000 to that little over $1 million number. However, this is the current proposal on the table. Senate Bill 301 is the one that they are looking that there, and may have come out while we were sitting here, are crafting the language for the legislation for the shared revenue. So we currently receive the $2,212,451 in shared revenue. That number has been static for many, many, many years, and it would go up by $1 million. So that if this all passes, and I think they're striving to get that done quickly.
They're hoping to get it done by Friday, is my understanding.
Yep.
And the shared revenues are still limited to law enforcement, roads, et cetera. There are limits imposed on the counties and municipalities' use of the additional dollars.
There are, but there's nothing that says that you can't. It's a bit, I don't want to say it's a bit of a shell game, but essentially they're giving us more money, but they're not saying that you have to spend less of your existing money. You can spend that differently and spend this money on, and it's on police, transportation, et cetera. And it's a lot of categories. It's a lot of our big expense categories. So hopefully we'll have some answers about that. Any more questions about shared revenue?
Well, and there's a good chunk that was also on the shared revenue for 911 that will be grants, which we may be able to, in addition to this, another 18 million total to be split up in grants to the various counties.
The other thing that at least in a recent reiteration still remained in this in SB 301 was the innovation grant money. So it was if two entities, a county and a municipality, a county and a township, two cities, whatever, chose to go together to do a project or share services, and they applied for the innovation funding, they would receive 25% of the cost of that project for the next 5 years. So for instance, we need to make some decisions about our financial system with the county, SAP, and moving forward. The city of Menominee needs to make some decisions about their financial system. Is there a possibility that we could go together to select a shared vendor and have 25% of our costs covered for the next 5 years, just as an option? I mean, we've done nothing more than just identify that as one particular area that might be an area where we could do that. But
yeah, and I know we've been having some discussions about other IT services more generally with some of the townships. And I believe Andrew's had some discussions with townships about clerk services. And so we may be able to achieve some financing for some things that we were thinking about doing anyway.
Yep, exactly. Next positive financial indicator is our interest income. So you can see, I'm sorry, I do need to apologize. That 2021 actual number is not correct. Now I realize that I did not go back to fully find the other one. It got moved it just got moved and I didn't track it down. But in 2021, we budgeted $125,000 of actual interest income. In 2020, we budgeted $100,000. And then in 2022, and in 2023, we budgeted $75,000. Our current projection based on 4 months of interest would project for the year at $520,000. So current 6-month treasury notes are at 5.4%. And our local government investment pool, which is so we have a check, Sophia spoke to this last month. We have a checking account, and then we have this pool of us and a whole bunch of other people where we can move money to earn a little bit more than we would earn in our checking account. That LGIP is earned 5% in May. So, and again, this is interest is an issue that we haven't had for, well, almost as long as I can remember, because you had a debate about whether we're going to earn 0.025% or 0.035%. But now they're actually like real life numbers that do matter. So, so those are the good things. And we're going to talk in a bit about fund balance as well. But here are just some information around salary and fringe. So we don't have solid numbers yet about our benefit package for health insurance, but we are trending very, very well with our implementation of a near site clinic and our healthcare shopping service, shopping service, Aletheus, and our pharmacy management work with Scout RX. And it does not look like we will have to implement any premium changes in 2024. In fact, we think we will probably be able to make some positive changes on the employee side and have it be cost neutral. So that's good news. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics is constantly running numbers based on the workforce. Wages and salaries with private employers grew 5.1% over the last year from April to April, and in the public sector about 4.7%. That's not how much more money necessarily those entities gave people. Well, they did ultimately give it to you. Those aren't necessarily the raises. Those are what it costs to continue to do business. So for us, that's often in the hiring side, where we might post a position at an entry level at a step 1 of our grid and end up having to hire them at a 3 or 4 in order to be competitive. This is taking into consideration all of those hiring ranges and the increases, and saying that over the last year it's averaged about 5%. I thought this was fascinating. The 20-year historical annual wage growth is 2.5%. 20 years. So we're seeing something that hasn't happened for 20 years. However, a 4% compensation grid increase from the center of the grid costs about $2.3 million. Which is not cheap. On the flip side, our workforce are our greatest asset. In so many places in county government, there's very little other operational budget. There's some pens and paper and IT and et cetera, little dollars amount. But like, for instance, in the child support budget I think she said she's $45,000 of actual other than people costs. So, but staffing is expensive.
You
So
want to touch on the vacancy rate with that or leave that for,
did I have it on that one? Oops.
nope.
No. Let's see. No, I've got it somewhere else.
Okay.
Okay, so I wanted to walk you through, because this is really more for the county board benefit side. But Dan and I worked hard on this last week to come up with a word picture that would help to understand levy limits a little bit better, and borrowing. So you are a young adult who's worked hard your whole life and you've lived responsibly. Your dad's ill and your parents need help to run a small family business, and they agree to pay your expenses in exchange for your assistance if you'll move home and help them. You recently bought a car and you've incurred some credit card debt. Your mom tells you she'll cover your base expenses and the car or credit card payments until the debt is paid off, and her payment to you will then be reduced accordingly. So here's what the next 4 years look like. So you've got, you had a place of your own, so you had a mortgage. You buy some groceries living at your mom and dad's. You've got in some insurance and fuel costs and some miscellaneous spending. I just plug dollar amounts in. Don't get too hung up on the numbers, I guess. And your car payment and your credit card payment are a total of $1,000. Your mom gives you $3,200 in that first year each month to cover those costs. And then she does so in the second year, although the amount owed on the car and the credit card are coming down. And she does so in the third year as well. And in that third year, the car and the credit card are paid off. So in the next year, as promised, your mom reduces the payment because those credit card issues are paid off. And now she just gives you $2,250. Pretty straightforward, right? Okay. In year 5, you're in an accident and your car is totaled. You and your mom discuss the options, and you can either reduce your base expenses to cover a new car payment, or you can take out a loan or borrow, and your mom will cover the new payment amount. So this is levy caps. The levy cap is on the left side. You are stuck at your base expenses. The only way to spend more money is to reduce those base expenses or borrow money. So this is kind of what it looks like from a county perspective. Again, very simple illustration. We have salaries and the highway department and DHS. That's all we do in our county. And we have some debt from renovating the government center. So in the first year, we have, those are all included in what we can tax for. In the second year, the debt's coming down. And so we reduce with the amount that we can tax for by the amount the debt is coming down. And then the third year, the debt is totally paid off. And now we are at that base amount. That is the levy cap. The only way to do something more is to either reduce that base amount, move those figures around. And I did a little bit of that. I made our salaries go up, the highway department went up, and DHS got less. So that's the only way to do that, or you borrow. Those are the only, okay, so the only other alternative, and this gets confusing for people, but is referendum. You can raise that base amount by a certain amount if you take it to referendum. Is that clear? Do people understand that? It's a kind of a complicated. I just think there's a common thought of this sort of social media mantra, don't read the comments, but when you read the comments, you know that people just have this idea that we can willy-nilly just increase or decrease things. I guess we can decrease things, but decrease things, or increase things, and we can't. The only way that we can is by doing something less or borrowing money. We can't just suddenly decide something's a really good idea and fund it without borrowing for it or reducing it from somewhere else. Questions about that?
Doesn't look like it.
All right, so this is still some slides from previous slides. This is our fund balance. We're currently sitting at about $17 million at the end of 2021. We'll have our 2022 numbers here shortly in the next month or so from our audit. And that means that we have so our unassigned fund balance, that means our pocket of money that you can spend any way that you wanted to, is about 14 million. It was 13.9 million in 2021. So our unassigned fund balance to essentially to our levy. It says general fund expenditures. They're basically, it's a correlate to our levy. We would have general fund balance that would cover 60% of our levy cost. If in day one, we just decided we're just gonna wipe our general fund out and we're gonna pay for as much of next year as we can, we could pay for 60% of the year with what's in there. I'm not advocating for that. I see Diane's face. I'm just saying that's how that works. So this is, yep. So our current fund balance is a little over 17 million. Our unassigned is just under 14 million. And then that just means, like I just explained, it's the ratio between our general fund expenditures and our fund balance that gets you that 60%. So many counties establish a fund balance policy as a part of their financial management policy. A fund balance policy would establish a plan for the amount that we would retain and then how the surplus would be utilized. So the recommended ratio by the Government Financial Officers Association is 25 to 35%. Obviously, I would eat my hat if I brought to you a proposal that said, let's reduce our fund balance ratio from 60% to 35%. Although it's a lot of money. No, exactly. We'd have to get out the defibrillator. But a conservative reduction from 60% to 50% is about almost $2.5 million, which could be invested in one-time projects, debt reduction, or capital improvements. Again, I always think about word pictures, and I've struggled with sort of coming up with a word picture for this, but essentially, and I may have said this to a few of you, let's say that Nick and I go into business together. I don't know what we're doing. We're selling widgets, and we are really great business people. And so inside of a short period of time, we're not only covering our costs, but we're starting to make a little bit of profit. And we tuck away some operating reserve that'll cover unexpected things that'll happen over the next 6 months. But once we get to that number where we've paying all of our bills, have some money in our savings to cover in case there's an unforeseen incident or incidents, we beyond that, if we just continue to save our money and don't reinvest it in the work that we do as as a business, that would be short-sighted. And it's not dissimilar. You can take the analogy wherever you want to go in your brain and say that's, that it's not the same. But I think there's an argument to be made for the fact that we have, we've done well over the last few years, and our fund balance has grown, and it is a consideration, at least in terms of a tool that you could use to reinvest a small part of that into operations. Again, we'll run quickly through. I don't think I have to run through this for you all, but just for the board's thinking to be just familiarize themselves with the terms of long-term borrowing and short-term borrowing, debt service, what we pay in interest and principal over time. And then here is our current. Again, I hope I won't have it for next month or for this month's for county board, but I hope we will have we'll have the updated numbers here. Well, this one won't change a lot because we already know sort of what it's going to look like going forward. In 2024, we will pay $4.48 million in principal and $589,000 in interest for a total of $5,069,813 in debt service. So one of the tools we talked about at CIP is the concept of short-term borrowing. Again, I don't have a recommendation. I'm not saying this is a tool that you are even going to need to use. We're very far from knowing where we're going to land with budget yet, but just to keep in mind that one option for essentially putting any increase in tax in the levy, in the amount that we tax into 1 year would be through the use of short-term borrowing, where we borrow at the end of the year, pay it off at the beginning of the following year, and then collect the tax revenue over the rest of the year in order to pay it back. The pros are it allows us a temporary increase the levy without a long-term borrowing. It's time limited. You decide what it should be borrowed for. And then the interest would be very small. The cons are that it does increase the levy, and we had that discussion obviously at CIP. There are a need to coordinate multiple steps at the end of the year, and it'd be easy for that to be a habit if you don't watch to make sure that you're not unanticipatedly developing a habit to just borrow it at the end of the year to make your budget work. Questions about short-term debt? All right, the elephant in the room. The neighbors of Dunn County. So this is a visual of what the operating income loss or surplus has looked like for NDC for the last 10 years from 2012 to 2021. And in each of those years, not including 22, we're going to talk about that in a second. In each of those years, they experienced an operating surplus, except for 2013, which was the year that they moved into the new facility. So they moved to the current facility in late 2013. There are 3 separate nursing home licenses for the 3 buildings that each hold 3 households, East, Central, and West. When fully staffed and fully open, there are 137 residents, and our current census is at about 100. They provide the meals for the senior nutrition program, Meals on Wheels, and they're reimbursed by DHS, and that is at no cost to NDC. I mean, there's no loss, any part of the loss, that's that. They employ about 150 county staff, and right now running at about 30 agency staff, and those are just round numbers. Issues that impact operations are staffing, attracting and retaining county staff versus agency or travel staff, complications with rates and supplemental payments that are all kind of Medicaid and Medicare involved, Medicaid involved. And there is an appeal process in play with the state. And then 2 of the households so 2 of the 3 in the central building are closed because of staffing, inadequate staffing, and about 70% of our residents are funded by Medicaid, which is the lowest funding source. And according to Wisconsin Watch, which is a news agency, and they also quote Leading Age, which is kind of the industry group for nursing homes. Our problems are not unique. Roughly 1 out of 5 caregiver positions are vacant in the state, and there are a bazillion open positions. And Wisconsin lost 42 skilled nursing facilities between 2016 and 2021. And then we just updated the list and looked at those in 22 and 23, 16 more have closed. So it's a tough business. So I'm going to give you just a little story. Carmen and I talked about, again, how to sort of make it real. I am not intentionally, although I will tell you, I did intentionally put the picture on the next one just to tug at your heartstrings a little bit. But I'm not intending to tug on your heartstrings. What I want you to do is sort of have that there is always going to be we should get out of the business discussion. And that is a discussion that can and maybe should be had. However, there's also a flip side of that in terms of the need. And so this is a story that Carmen put together of a composite of individuals. No, these are not real people. That kind of tells what that looks like. So this is about Jerry, the family of Gerald Williams. He's 84 and he lives in Colfax. He currently lives at home with his wife, Mary, who's 84, or lived at home with his wife, Mary, who's 82. And she has been his primary caregiver. He's been declining in health for some years, and all 3 of their kids live out of state. One day, Mary walks into the kitchen and she finds that he has fallen and he's having a hard time breathing. So she calls 911 and he's taken to the hospital. He's in the emergency room at Mayo here in Menominee for 56 hours before an inpatient hospital bed becomes available. And the nearest hospital bed is in Eau Claire. So keep in mind, he's been there more than a day and a half. I actually just heard a personal story from somebody who just sat in the emergency room for 22 hours, I believe, while they looked for a bed for her. Anyway, long period of time. Once he is transferred to Eau Claire, he has a 3-week stay until he's ready to be discharged to a long-term care facility, a nursing facility for rehabilitation, maybe to live there for the long term. One of his children comes home and attempts to help because Mary can't drive that far to visit him. When the hospital social services staff talk with Jerry and Mary about the options, they give them a list of potential nursing homes in the area. However, Colfax, which would be the closest to them, nursing home is closing, as has the one in Prairie Farm and another one in Eau Claire. The closest facility to their home is still open is NDC, and that's his first choice. But when the hospital makes a referral to NDC, they're unable to accept him because they don't have any beds available because of staffing. They've been overrun with referrals, and now they're the only nursing home serving 4 communities. One of the facilities in Eau Claire where he was in the hospital has an open bed, but it's too far for Mary to drive to visit him. And their son needs to go home to where he lives and is not able to transport Mary to visit Gerald over the long term. So this puts the Williams in a difficult situation. They need to decide if their priority is quality of care or receiving care in their community where Mary can visit Gerald. This situation is directly related to the changes in long-term care access and how the decrease in nursing home beds causes stress on the residents in small rural communities. People who have lived their whole lives are unable to remain in their communities or near their families, and they're dealing with the extra stress of having to navigate all of that during a difficult time. So yes, it is a shameless pledge that I found the most cute, adorable older couple that I possibly could to illustrate what Jerry and Mary looked like. But this is not an exaggerated situation for what the nursing situation looks, skilled nursing facilities look like in our area or across the country. So, NDC's had, these are the things to consider. They've had an operating surplus in 8 of the last 10 years, 2013 and 2022. And we'll talk about 2022 in a second. 4 nursing homes have closed within a 45-minute drive shed in the last 3 years. Colfax, Pioneer Health and Prairie Farm, Grace Lutheran in Altoona, and Clearwater Care in Eau Claire. NDC committee is planning on reopening one of the households in 2024. We're going to build a budget based on that, but it's unlikely that the other one will open, again, due to staffing. The anticipated loss for NDC in 2022 is $1.2 million. And 23 is projecting to have an operating loss as well. It is early in the year in the sense of we're still only operating on 4 or 5 months worth of data. If staffing's taken out of the calculation, then the operating budget is on target, but staffing is a significant area of issue. And we're still puddling around with on the revenue side with some of the rates. So, but not to sugarcoat anything, it's certainly a different financial picture than it was in the previous 10 years. So what's the summary? Dunn County has a very healthy fund balance, and it appears that it will grow again at the end of 22, in spite of that over $1 million operating deficit for NDC. We have not borrowed money in 2023. We did approve the $1 million, but it doesn't appear that we're going to need it at this point. And we're tracking that monthly. And you did not vote for any borrowing for capital improvements or need to vote for borrowing for capital improvements. The unemployment market remains competitive. And our turnover rate is running at about 20% a year. And this means that we are underspending our budgeted salary and fringe by about 9% right now. We budgeted it for a 2.82% vacancy rate. So there's a lot of wiggle in there. Taking that number from 2.82 to 3% is like, I want to say it's like several $100,000. I don't want to speak definitively because I don't remember exactly, but it's a lot of money because we have about a $48 million salary budget. So a part of a percentage point is a lot of money. Sales and investment interest continues to increase, and implementation of a conservative fund balance policy could result in the ability to invest in one-time projects or reduce debt or fund capital expenditures. I think that's it.
I mean, that's all.
That's all. So again, I printed it for you so you have it as a reference point. If you need any back data to any of this, just ask. We'll find it for you. Again, I'm gonna Beata and I are gonna offer that after the budget workshop in August, in those first few weeks of September, that we would be glad to meet with small groups of people or one-on-one with people to help them to understand better, kind of as we understand better what our financial picture is looking like. I don't think it's going to be a wickedly difficult year, but I will say that Beata and I had a lengthy discussion, and we, instead of asking department heads to bring in a 0 increase budget, asked them to bring in a cost to continue budget. So we asked them not to go crazy. We don't know if they'll go crazy, if they're going crazy yet, but Beata's working hand in hand with them to try to keep the craziness not to happen. But I come back to an explanation, and he's left, but I come back to a example of Tom Carlson last year. We had a 0 increase last year, and Tom was feeling guilty because he asked for $350 more of fuel costs because he anticipated his fuel was going to cost more. And it's like, as Beata and I have, and Beata says eloquently, if we hold people, we can tell people to only do a 0 increase. And then we, never have a true picture of what it costs to continue to do business. And we don't get to make the decisions about whether what we're currently spending our money on is, I don't know if best is the right way, but is where we want to spend our money on. So it's harder. It's easier to say 0%. It's going to be harder to do it this way. Beata and I intend to walk alongside of you and bring you the best information we can and recommendations and understand fully the financial realities that we work within. But we think it might be time to say, what does it really cost for us to continue to do business? And then pare back from there. Any questions?
It does not look like it.
All right.
Oh.
I'm done.
I mean, it's a big bite. but it's the early June version. It's just gonna get bigger. All right. Thank you for your county manager's report. And on to item 6, reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee. A request to change use of capital improvements, ARPA funding, 2023 facilities committee. Chris, do you wanna?
I will. I thought I was done talking.
I
So
can if you don't.
so I'm having this come forward from it actually was also approved by facilities committee, so I'm not exactly sure just to get in the 6s or the 7s, but because it's a financial consideration, I thought it would be best for it to come to executive committee. In the 2023 capital improvement plan was budgeted $500,000 to install a road and a walkway from between here and the judicial center. And when Scott Navafeld and I met earlier in the year, one, I didn't realize that was in that expenditure was in the capital improvement plan for this year. But secondly, when we really dug into it, we realized that in practical reality, it would be an investment of $500,000 to develop a road that very few people would use. Some family and children services staff and behavioral health staff who have to go over to court occasionally, IT staff. Dan was giving me a hard time about taking away his road, but IT staff, a few, Melissa Gillenbach goes back and forth. I mean, there's a few people that go back and forth. There is actually a service road which runs behind our building, pops out right next to the Dunn County Jail. And it is plowed. It's gravel, it's plowed, it's drivable. I drove it just to try and see. It's actually not in bad shape.
It's bikeable even.
Yeah.
I tested that last week.
There you go.
Also did, with a motorized.
It's not bad shape. So the recommendation coming from Scott and I, and then facilities is to not spend $500,000 to build a road. Instead to invest what it might take, which would be something far less than that, to upgrade that service road just enough if it needs gravel fill, if it needs to, just a little bit of making it probably will not be drivable in February, March, or April, like in spring thaw time, but otherwise it's not a bad way to get from here to there if someone doesn't want to take the highway. So not spend the $500,000. We are looking at what it will cost to run a walkway to the judicial center, because a lot of people walk on 29, a lot, maybe that's an exaggeration, but people regularly walk on 29 coming to and from the judicial center. And so putting in a walkway would be safe. Looking at some partnership with the city, don't have numbers at all about what that might look like. But in terms of cost, but it would be significantly less than $500,000. Looking at the highway department is looking at getting us some estimates and potentially doing the work, which would further decrease our any additional investment. So so that is part of the plan. And then the other part was some of you may have heard Scott or I speak to the need just to do some security upgrades to this building. So there's $80,000 in the 2024 CIP budget to add a badged swiped entry system externally to this building. And what we would ask is to do that project this year, which would free up $80,000 out of the 2024 CIP plan, and just spend it out of that $500,000. So nixing the road, spending what we need to upgrade the service road, to explore with highway the building of a walking path to the judicial center, and spending the $80,000 out of that allocated $500,000, and then freeing up $80,000 of capital improvement that's in next year's plan.
Mike?
I might just add that we'll probably work in partnership with the city on the walking path, and potentially get some grants there. And I like to explain it as us country folks say that it's just a field road right now, so it's pretty hard to use in the spring.
Yeah.
And they'll put crushed rock and base course, so it'll be drivable year round.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the timeline on that is, but I know that the city is in discussions with the gravel mine about how to do the roads and reclamation. So there might be on that side, some easier ways to get through coming up in the next couple of years as well. I don't know what the timeline on that is, but I have an in on the city council, so I figured I'd mention it. Okay, so we would need a motion on that. Supervisor Rogers moved, Supervisor Steen seconds. Any further speaking to the ARPA reallocation that will then go on?
Nick just indicated he will form it into a resolution for the county
Perfect.
board. So that it's a formal change of the CIP plan from 23 and 24.
Do you need that in the motion, or is the motion as it is sufficient?
It's sufficient.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. 6B, resolution amending the county supervisory district maps 12 and 14, and then 6C 28 and 23. And I see Andrew is scampering up to explain what's up with that.
I haven't scampered in a minute, so that was exciting. So what happened, these two resolutions are being brought forward to you and then hopefully the county board because the city of Menominee has annexed some land into their areas. One area is at the very top point of the city of Menominee. It's actually the Cedar Brook Church property. And then the other part is actually just below the airport. There's a section of land that's being brought in. They annexed those two pieces of land. And so instead of having to create new wards with nobody living in them, we thought it would be best if the resolutions came forward to actually modify the supervisory district maps. So Mike, I'm sorry, you're going to lose Cedar Brook Church out of your district. I figure you'll live with it, but this is basically just kind of a housekeeping thing to make sure that we can get everything in place so that the maps can be modified so that I can be ready for next year's 2024 elections to make sure everyone is in the right spots. So questions?
Anybody? Oh. Someone needs to let John Calabrese back in.
Oh,
He
I'll
stepped
go.
outside.
Justin's got it.
I would scamper off to do it myself, but
Justin's scampering.
okay, great.
You need separate motions on,
We could do both.
can,
Nick,
for
could we-
12 and 14 and 22 and
We combine them?
23.
It would. Yeah, you could do them both together. They, as Andrew said, they're very much kind of just a ministerial thing. Truly, there will have to be ballots created for a voting precinct that has
No one in it.
no
No resident.
voters in
residents.
it. It would be required under the law, and so this would eliminate the need for that. But I think it's okay if you do both of them in one because they're very small in scope.
Okay, they're voter neutral. They're just chunks of land. So Supervisor Morehouse, I believe you were in the
Beat
process of.
Supervisor Steen to the punch. I would move approval of amending the supervisory district maps for districts 12, 14, 28, and 23.
Second there.
Beat him.
Supervisor Morehouse and Supervisor Rogers.
You never use this thing.
Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion passes. We did 7A already, so 7C. We have no 7B, so we'll just jump over 7B. 7C, Health and Human Services, Health Department budget adjustment. Y'all have seen about 1 million of these at this point. Does anyone have any? Besides Gary's phone, does anyone have anything to add? Okay, so we need a motion. No? Oh, right, reports. Yes. Budget adjustment, budget adjustment, budget adjustment. Any questions on any of those? Health Department, Veteran Services, Human Services?
I think we have to.
Budget adjustment?
Well,
It's an amendment to the budget, right?
yes, it is.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it looks like there are three of them. I'll combine those into one resolution for the county board meeting.
So would that have been more appropriately 6D then, rather than 7?
Well, I think there is sufficient information contained within the agenda and public meeting notice to apprise the public of what the committee is going to consider and
Okay.
potential action. And so I think it's okay to take it up now. I don't think it would create a problem.
Okay, Supervisor Steen,
I move that we.
microphone.
Thank you so much. I move we combine all three
And approve them?
and approve them.
Yes. Do I have a second? Supervisor Zons is popping in there. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Reports from standing committees. All right. Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you very much. Just for the neighbors, we met at the end of May. We're still working on trying to get a CNA class there, so perhaps we can get some locals to work. The bus purchase process is moving along. They in fact had a lunch today. I think Nick, you were there and to raise money for that bus. It's amazing how much they've raised. They had a disaster drill, which I accidentally happened to be there for. The federal, state, local people were there and staff were dressed up as country farmers that particular day because that was their, oh, it's really interesting looking. Sarah Lasowski is the director of nursing. I think she's been introduced. She's been here a couple of months now. She's really starting to fit in. And you got a great report from Chris, which I'm really glad to see. We meet again June 22nd.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Zons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CRNT committee actually met yesterday here in this room, except I was virtually in the Twin Cities. But still, we had quite an interesting meeting. We actually had a really long broadband presentation from Dan Dunbar regarding the broadband task force that just wrapped up its task this past week with some recommendations that will actually at some point probably come before this committee and the county board if our committee kind of takes it up. But it was really interesting to see some of the results from the broadband survey already, and the places that are seeing the least amount of access actually pretty much kind of tie up with the areas that have not gotten broadband grants. And some of the grants or some of the areas that there were grants submitted and were not awarded because it was a much greater competition. Dunn County is actually I think the one county in the state that has gotten more broadband grants than any other county in the state, as a matter of fact. So the task force, some of the broad conclusions that we kind of came up with is that there needs to be a point person in Dunn County that kind of serves as the person who's in charge of broadband, whether that's an employee here or a new employee or a contracted person or whatever. There should be that, plus there should be the formation. We'd like to see the formation of a broadband committee that basically continues the work of the task force. It wouldn't necessarily need to be county board members, but it needs to be stakeholders who have basically a strong interest in broadband and also are passionate about it, so that are kind of willing to take on a lot of the effort and the work. And Eau Claire County has had a really successful broadband committee that has a lot of stakeholders outside of the government, that we kind of think that we'd like to kind of model things on, because the survey, not only did it kind of point out some of the areas in the county that are not served or inadequately served by broadband, but also some areas that should be served, but some of the residents feel that they are not served. So that is a possible kind of a sign of education, where people think they don't have broadband access, but they may have it, or maybe they have the ability to have it, but they can't afford it, or think it's too expensive, or things like that. So at some point, we're going to probably the CRNT committee will bring forth some of the recommendations of that task force, and maybe it'll be something that the county board kind of votes on. This is all a part of the BEAD planning grant. There's a broadband grant that goes towards planning and rolling out broadband access, and this is fulfilling part of that grant that came to Dunn County. So that was a big part of the committee. We also heard from Extension. For those who aren't aware, the counties, when Extension kind of essentially lost a bunch of its funding and had to kind of spread a lot of the roles between counties and share resources, the one part that was not impacted was county ag agents. Each county still kind of maintained their own ag agent. However, because of the education process and things like that, and the amount of hiring that needs to go involved, there's no way that Extension can fulfill the one ag agent per county. Plus, they have to be a knowledgeable in all things ag. So they're kind of going to a model where there's like someone who's a crop and soil expert who's shared between 3 counties, and then a person who is dairy expert that is shared between 3 counties. So you have some of that type of setup, and we heard from a couple of those folks during our meeting, talking about what they're doing from a crop and soil perspective, and from a dairy perspective as well. We also got some economic development update from our county manager. And that was kind of the gist of it. And then we'll meet again next month.
Thank you, Supervisor Zahn. Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Judiciary and Law Committee met in this room on May 22nd and had a good meeting. We discussed the reports of the departments, and 2 new deputies started that day. The Sheriff's Department, and he talked about being pleased about that. One of the squad cars was totaled the week before. They were not pleased about that. And they may come forward with a carry forward request to the board, depending on deductible and whatever else happens when you total your car. The district attorney reported that the Joint Finance Committee in Madison approved pay increases for prosecutors, which was great news. That's something that we requested in the legislative meeting to all of our legislators. So that was great news. And then toward the end, we had a discussion about recording the Judiciary and Law Committee meetings. The sheriff had raised concerns about the meetings being posted on YouTube, the recordings, and some of the comments on there. And he indicated that at times he has felt a little hesitant to share maybe as much as he would share because of that, and out of concern that the meetings are up there in perpetuity. And so we didn't really resolve it. And but the committee agreed that they want to make a decision about do we post those on YouTube? Is there a policy regarding that? Is there something that can be different for that committee in terms of recording or not? And so they may not know it, but Chair McCullough and the county manager and maybe Nick will get some questions from me on that in the next week or so to see what we can present the committee with.
And we are looking into some options.
Great, thank you. And the next meeting will be on June 26th at 4:30, right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Calabrese. Supervisor Steen, you had
Yes, may I be excused, please?
you're excused.
Thank you.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health and Human Services Board last met on May 23rd with its chairman zooming in from her office, which she does not recommend. It's not the best way to chair a meeting. All of our members were present. We said goodbye to Dale Tickler, the deputy director in Human Services. I don't know how long has Dale been with us? Here a long time. She retired on June 2nd. We had a really nice presentation from our Birth to 3 staff. Birth to 3 program is a mandated program, woefully underfunded. So we talked about the program, and then we have a grant for a Birth to 3 recreation program that has expanded and expanded and expanded, and is very much in demand, very successful program. We had our usual great reports from all 3 of our departments, each of which is sort of consistently getting some kind of recognition or award or commendation for something. I mean, they do great work, and I should probably be bringing those to the executive committee so we all know about it. We noted the DHS vouchers and approved 3 budget adjustments. And our next meeting is next Thursday, which is the 22nd at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. Supervisor Rogers.
Facilities met on the 24th, and we had a report from Aubrina, the UW Stout student that's been working on the project for, let's say, the better part of the year now. She did a study on the energy usage of the county and presented options on ways that we can use it to help planning and moving forward to both become a little more energy efficient, become more carbon free. A lot of uses that will come out of that study. So she reported back to us as a very, very thorough and in-depth paper. She did a very good job. The fair is getting ready to get underway here. They've opened up, they now have open classes that have been well received. They got a flagpole they're putting up this year in memory of Deb. I believe she is paying for it, and then we will put it up. What's that?
I was gonna say.
Deb's dad, I'm sorry.
You should tell us that. Whoa.
Okay, no. Yeah, the buildings that we're not gonna demo out back we're now looking, or they're looking into some historical potential for maybe some grants to do some refurbishing and fixing up. We got some repairs to do to them that'll be cheaper than the demoing, of course. The judicial generator bid's been accepted, and Scott's working on moving forward with getting that taken care of and installed. We got a mower on order, but that may not be in until sometime in September. Nick is working on the transfer station. Let's see, I got some notes there. I guess the gist of it is they've got some legal consulting, and they're still working on putting all that together, and he wants some more information before he makes any additional recommendation. We do have a we do have a parks ordinance that's getting ready to come forward probably next month.
Thank you Supervisor Rogers. Supervisor Prochnow.
Highway met this morning. Basically, we are starting construction of highways. We did the road for the township last week. We are starting County Road V project in northern Wisconsin, northern Dunn County right now. We're paving actually today up there. We get that done. We're gonna start on the County Road Z project down in southern Dunn County. That will hopefully start next week sometime. The County Road B project, middle of the county, getting all steps in the county this year. From Packer Drive North, we're hoping to do that by this fall. Everything goes right. The project south of that was put off this year and put on to next year. Some of the preliminary bids are actually getting a lot higher than we anticipated, so be prepared that it could be like about $2 million more on our side alone, so. Otherwise, that's all we got. Next meeting will be July 12th.
Thank you Supervisor Prochnow. Supervisor Headland.
Yeah, thank you.
There we go.
We slide. There we are. Close enough here? Okay. Our admin committee meeting met last month and discussion, some good discussions and some good information was presented from Jenna and her staff about how the are gonna call it our healthcare benefits program is progressing. And I think she may, I don't know if you got any updates for us. Okay. Yeah. That, and I know it's a work in progress but the numbers are trending extremely well. The aforementioned things that Chris put up there, with the, our own, private, I guess you'd call it, healthcare, option. And things like, I just noticed a thing email, you probably all got it, for summer physicals for students going back to school. I imagine that'll be at a fraction of a price of what it would cost, say, to go to Mayo or Marshfield or whatever, those types of facilities. And all that counts up, and it's counting up to the point where I guess my guesstimation to the committee was that if we can continue down this path, as Chris had put up there, we probably wouldn't have to raise the cost of insurance, the portion that the staff pay. And just that alone, I think, might help retention. If someone says, wow, what they're doing here is helping me as a family person, or, I can look for not having to, wonder if my pay increase is going to be enough to pay my additional cost of insurance. So I think those are all super pluses, and looking forward to getting those updates as Jenna and her staff put them together. A minor dilemma has occurred in the admin department. We have a meeting scheduled for the 22nd, and I was very fortunate to get invited to go along on a fishing trip to Canada. They called me last Saturday and said, hey, how would you like to go along? And of course I said, sure. And so I'll be out of town up in Canada all of next week, and have been unable to contact my assistant chair, Mr. Lenow, who was contacted at our last county board meeting by a neighbor up where his cabin is, saying that his roof was settling in. So I know he didn't make it to our last admin committee meeting, saying that, he probably would be up there. And I have left messages. I don't want to fill his message unit up at home, but I've left messages there and have called and not left messages, just hoping to make contact with him. If not, Chris and I have got a plan and force to kick in here at the end of the week. So I don't know for sure if there will be an admin meeting on June 22nd. It may be postponed. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Headland. Supervisor Quinn isn't here, but I understand the meeting was very short. Is there anything you think he would need to add?
Oh, I'm trying to think. We talked about zoning, which is always quite exciting, but it was rather quick. Nick took care of that. So there'll be something coming eventually, a zoning change. What else was there?
We approved the notion of a housing task force similar to the broadband task force and reviewed some potential membership. We talked again a little bit about the ordinance that we looked at today and got another thumbs up from the two town chairmen who've been with us really consistently for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 months that we've been dealing with it. And I think that's it.
Excellent, thank you.
I know it's like 40 minutes.
Yeah, that sounded unnatural.
I got one thing, if, just a comment, we had a report, we always have some updates at, the West Cat meeting of hopefully positive things that are going on that they do for people. And one of the things was that 2 of the people that have been part of their furthering education program, to become more self-sustainable, both became CNAs. And, one had reported they found only a part-time position. So, might want to call West Cat. Hey, we got a full-time position. No, so I'm not sure, but anyway, I was pleased to hear that was something that people were considering, but, anything we could do to, I know you're looking at doing some own schooling at our facility. Is that going anywhere?
It's going somewhere very slowly, difficulty with rules and regulations.
Oh, okay.
But they're working on it. It isn't something that we think is gonna solve a big problem, but if you get 2 or 3, that'd be great.
Okay, item 9, our next meeting date, despite the note here, is almost certainly not June 14th. I'm pretty sure it's July 12th. And if nobody has anything else, we are adjourned.